The night Clarabith Morrison learned the price of her life. She wasn't meant to hear it, but the walls of her father's cabin in Devil's Creek were thin, and his voice was loud when he was angry, which was most of the time. 3 pack horses, a crate of dried meat, $2 silver. That was what Jacob Morrison thought his daughter was worth. Clarabith sat frozen on her straw mattress, her pale hands pressed over her mouth as her father bargained with the fur trapper on the other side of the wall. She had heard her name spoken like a curse all her life, but hearing it now haggled over like a piece of livestock broke something deep inside her. She was 19. Her skin was white as new snow. Her hair fell like silver threads down her back. Her eyes were a soft, strange pink. The people of Devil's Creek called her Ghost Girl, a curse, a bad omen, a mistake that should have died at birth. Her father never called her anything at all unless he needed someone to blame. Clarabith closed her eyes, the sound of his gravel-deep voice slicing through her chest again. A wild man is a fitting match for a creature like her, he said. Take her up there. Maybe the mountains will finish what her mother's death couldn't. Her mother had died giving birth to her. Her father never forgave her for living. Have you ever been told you were a mistake so many times you started to believe it? Have you ever been sold by the person who should have loved you most? When the deal was finally made, Clarabith stayed very still, her breath shaking, her arms wrapped around her thin body. She had always lived as quietly as she could, hoping silence might keep her safe. But now she understood. Silence meant nothing. Her father had decided her fate, and it was already too late to stop it. At sunrise, he shoved her out into the cold morning light without a single goodbye. Ezra Kane, the trapper who now owned her, didn't say much. His face was hard and unreadable, lined by years of wind and mountain storms. He only pointed to the back of his wagon. Clarabith climbed in. Clutching the brim of the hat, he tossed her way to keep the sun from burning her sensitive eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply folded into herself the way someone does when they know no one would hear them anyway. For 3 days, the wagon creaked through the mountains. Ezra gave her water and small pieces of dried meat when they camped, but he did not look at her the way people in Devil's Creek did. Not with disgust, not with fear. He simply looked past her the way someone looks past a tree or a rock. She was cargo, nothing more. On the 3rd night, they camped beneath a rock formation shaped like a sleeping bear. The fire crackled low, throwing gentle flickers of orange light around them. Clarabith sat with her hands wrapped around a tin cup of weak coffee, staring into the flames. Ezra studied her for a moment before speaking. "You're bound for Timber Ridge," he said, to a man named Caleb McKinnon. The name hit her like cold water. She had expected a faceless monster, a beast, a savage, not a man with a name. Ezra poked the fire gently. "Caleb's a mountain man. Lived alone 4 years now. Lost his wife and baby in a winter storm." Clarabith lifted her eyes, surprised. Grief was something she understood. Pain was too. Ezra went on, his voice lower now. "Word of you reached him months ago. He asked for you by name." Her breath caught in her throat. A stranger asking for her. Why? Ezra looked at her long enough for her to drop her gaze. "He knows what you look like," he said, "and he doesn't think you're cursed." Clarabith frowned, confused. "Mountain folk," Ezra continued, "believe the rare things are gifts from the Great Spirit, not mistakes." She blinked, stunned. "Your skin," he said quietly, "they see as the color of sacred snow. Your hair, moonlight. Your eyes, winter roses. Caleb doesn't think he bought a burden. He thinks someone sent him an angel." Clarabith's chest tightened painfully, her heart fighting between hope and fear. No one had ever spoken of her like that. Ever. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat awake by the dying fire, watching the stars above her. She had never felt smaller or more unsure. Was this kindness real? Or was it another trick before a crueler blow? On the 4th day, the wagon entered a hidden valley. It was nothing like Devil's Creek. It was alive, full of color. A quiet stream cut through the center. Aspen leaves shimmered gold. Birds filled the air with their soft songs. Clarabith felt herself breathe, really breathe, for the first time in her life. Then she saw the cabin. A thin stream of smoke curled from its chimney. A man stepped out and began walking toward them. Caleb McKinnon. He was tall, strong, and carried himself like the land itself trusted him. His dark hair was tied back, his bronze skin warmed by years in the sun. His eyes, deep brown and steady, locked onto her the moment he saw her. Not with shock, not with disgust, but with something close to awe. Ezra spoke first. Clarabith couldn't hear the words, only the murmur of voices. Then Caleb stepped closer, slow and careful, stopping a respectful distance away. She braced herself, waiting for cruelty. But instead, Caleb spoke one soft word. Snow Angel. Clarabith's breath broke. No one had ever given her a name that sounded like love. Caleb showed her to a small cabin of her own. Warm, clean, safe, with flowers on the table. You will have peace here, he said. No one will enter unless you say so. Then he left her to rest, and for the first time in her life, Clarabith closed the door, knowing no one would burst in. For the first time, she felt safe. Do you believe that sometimes being sold can be the beginning of being chosen? That the cruelest rejection can lead to the most beautiful acceptance? Clarabith woke on her first morning in the valley, expecting everything to disappear. Safety felt like a dream someone would snatch away if she breathed too loudly. But when she opened her door, the sunlight was soft, the air smelled of pine, and no one was waiting to shout, strike, or drag her out to work. Instead, a single wildflower lay on her doorstep, a purple mountain aster, delicate, bright, beautiful. She looked around, but no one was there. The next day, a red Indian paintbrush. The day after that, a pale blue columbine. Always quiet, always gentle. Never a note, never footsteps. Just flowers. Soft reminders that someone noticed her, someone cared. Clarabith's heart didn't know what to do with kindness. It felt too warm, too bright. Kindness had never been free in her world. But here in the valley, kindness seemed to grow like the wildflowers, without being asked. On the 6th morning, a woman approached her cabin. Her steps were slow, not wanting to scare her. Clarabith froze in the doorway. The woman smiled warmly and held out a wooden bowl of steaming stew. She pointed to herself. Sarah. Then she pointed to Clarabith. Her voice was gentle, inviting. Clarabith swallowed hard. Clarabith, she whispered. Sarah repeated it softly, then shook her head with a smile. Snow Angel. Clarabith's breath caught. Caleb's name for her. The mountain folk had accepted it too. Sarah visited often after that. She sat with her while mending clothes. Her little nephew Tommy played near the stream. Though the boy coughed so hard sometimes it shook his whole body. One day, Clarabith saw a familiar plant by the water. Mullein leaves, soft and broad. Her mother had used it when Clarabith was sick as a child, crushing the leaves and mixing them with grease to soothe her lungs. Fear held her still. In Devil's Creek, using plants like that would have gotten her slapped or worse. Her father always said strange knowledge meant witchcraft. But Tommy was so pale, so tired. Clarabith's hands trembled as she gathered the leaves, crushed them, mixed them with a little lard, and walked to Sarah's cabin. She held out the salve with shaking hands and pointed to Tommy's chest. Her heart pounded. What if Sarah misunderstood? What if she got angry? But Sarah didn't hesitate. She gently rubbed the salve onto the boy's chest and gave Clarabith a small nod of trust. The next morning, Tommy ran up the path, laughing, his cough gone. Sarah hugged Clarabith with tears in her eyes. It was the first time anyone had ever looked at Clarabith with gratitude instead of fear. Word spread through the valley, not in a loud way, just quiet whispers among families. The strange pale woman knew healing plants. She was gentle. She helped. People brought her leaves and roots to identify. They asked simple questions. They shared smiles. Clarabith felt herself slowly become part of the valley's rhythm. And every day, somewhere near her cabin, she still found a new flower. Caleb watched her from a distance, not with hunger or ownership, but with a patient understanding that made her stomach flutter in ways she didn't recognize. Weeks passed, warm and peaceful. Then one evening, Caleb approached her cabin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft rose and gold. Snow Angel, he said quietly, will you walk with me? Clarabith's breath hitched, but she nodded and followed him along the stream until they reached a hidden pool. The water was calm, reflecting the stars overhead. They stood quietly for a while, listening to the gentle sounds of night. Caleb finally spoke. My wife Rebecca, he said softly, had hands like yours. She could make things grow. When she died, the valley lost its color. Clarabith's heart ached for him. For years, he continued, I lived like winter, cold, empty. But then I heard stories of a girl in Devil's Creek, a girl with snow-white skin and moonlight hair, treated like she was a mistake. He turned to her, his eyes deep and warm. But I didn't hear a story of a mistake. I heard a story of a flower growing in stone. Clarabith felt tears she didn't know she had rising in her eyes. No one has ever seen strength in me, she whispered. Only shame. Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. He rested a strong, warm hand over hers. A man who complains about snow, he said quietly, cannot see the mountain. Your father could not see you. But I do. Clarabith's tears fell freely now, not from pain, but from the shocking, overwhelming feeling of being valued. They walked back together in silence, but everything had changed. The fear she once felt around him was gone. The distance between them was gone. The world suddenly felt bigger, brighter, possible. The next weeks were gentle and full of small joys. He taught her to ride. She taught him about books she'd secretly read. They laughed softly in the evenings, while shelling beans or mending clothes. He showed her how to track deer prints, and she showed him how to brew calming tea from chamomile. They weren't husband and wife yet, but they were something just as powerful. Two lonely souls learning they didn't have to be alone. Then one evening, under a full moon, Caleb called her to the quiet pool again. He pulled something from a small leather pouch, a necklace made of carved wooden beads and polished river stones. Snow Angel, he said, his voice deep with emotion. You came here as a seed. I watched you grow. I watched you bring life back to this valley, and to my heart. He stepped closer. I want to stand with you, work with you, live with you. Will you be my wife? Clarabith's breath broke into a sob. A happy one. I choose you, she whispered, with all my heart. Caleb cupped her face with both hands, and for the first time in her life, Clarabith felt chosen. Not bought, not endured, not hidden. Chosen. Loved. Have you ever been called worthless until someone looked at you and saw everything you were meant to be? Have you ever discovered that the place you were sent to die became the place you finally learned to live? Clarabith's wedding day was nothing like the town ceremonies she had seen from a distance in Devil's Creek. There were no fancy dresses, no church bells, no expensive decorations. Instead, there was the valley, quiet, sacred, wrapped in the warm golden glow of the setting sun. Sarah and the other women washed Clarabith's hair in warm sage water, brushing it gently until it shone like silver silk. They dressed her in a soft white buckskin dress, stitched by their own hands. Instead of a veil, Sarah wove tiny wildflowers from Clarabith's own garden into her hair. You look like the first snow of winter, Sarah whispered proudly. Caleb stood waiting in the clearing, wearing his finest buckskins, the beadwork telling the story of his people and his past. When Clarabith walked toward him, the small crowd of mountain families fell silent, not out of shock, but out of quiet awe. Old Samuel carried a worn Bible. He spoke a blessing in a voice cracked with age and wisdom. Caleb took her hands. His vows were simple. I will be your shelter when storms come. I will be the strength beside you. I will provide for you, protect you, and stand with you. Clarabith's voice trembled as she spoke her own vows. I will be the heart of our home. I will walk beside you in every season. I will care for our people, our land, and our family. Sarah and Samuel draped a quilt around their shoulders, binding them together as husband and wife. They drank from the same cup of stream water, sealing their promise. It was the most beautiful moment of Clarabith's life, and for many months after, life stayed beautiful. Clarabith learned every path in the valley. She tended her garden. She made salves and teas for the sick. She cooked beside Sarah and laughed with the children. The men nodded to her with respect. The women hugged her like a sister. She had a home, a family, a purpose. She had love. Caleb adored her gently, quietly, deeply. He treated her not as someone fragile, but someone precious. They built a life together, not rushed, not forced, but grown slowly like the seasons. Clarabith often woke before dawn just to watch him sleep beside her, peace softening the lines of his face. Sometimes he would wake to find her watching him, and he would pull her close with a sleepy smile. Everything she had never dared to dream became her reality. Until the day a rider came. It was late autumn, the air crisp, the leaves fiery red. A horse galloped into the valley, its rider breathless. He ran to Caleb, speaking urgently. Clarabith watched from their cabin. Her heart tightened when she saw Caleb's expression change, calm turning to warning. He walked to her, steady as always. "A group of soldiers is coming," he said. 12 of them. "They will be here by sunset." Her stomach dropped. "Why?" Caleb's voice was low, careful. "They have a guide. A white man. Tall, black beard, voice like stones grinding." Her blood ran cold. There was only one man it could be. "Jacob," she whispered. Her father was coming. Fear tore through her chest. Old fear. The kind that made her want to hide under beds and behind doors. The kind that stole her breath. But then Caleb's hand rested on her shoulder. Strong, steady, safe. "You are not alone," he said. Sarah rushed to her, wrapping her in a fierce hug. The valley families gathered around. Not one person looked afraid. They looked ready to protect her. Clarabith felt something rise in her. Something new. Something strong. It was courage growing from love. "I will not hide," she said quietly. "Not from him. Not anymore." Caleb nodded with pride. Just before sunset, the soldiers arrived. 12 horses clattering, blue coats, rifles. And at the front, riding high on a black horse, Jacob Morrison, her father. His eyes locked on her with the same hate, she remembered, the same disgust. "There," he shouted to the sergeant. "There's my daughter, taken by savages. She is my property. Retrieve her at once." Mountain men stepped forward in a protective line. They didn't raise their rifles. They didn't shout. They simply stood. A wall of strength. Caleb stood at their front. Clarabith stepped forward alone. "I am not your property," she said clearly. "I never was." Jacob's face twisted in rage. "You are bewitched. They poisoned your mind." "No," Clarabith said softly. "You did." The soldiers shifted uneasily. "You speak of kidnapping," she continued. "But I remember a deal. 3 horses, a crate of meat, $2 silver. You sold me." Gasps rippled through the soldiers. Jacob sputtered. "Lies." Sarah stepped forward. "She healed my nephew when he was sick," she said firmly. "She is no witch. She is Snow Angel." Old Samuel spoke next. "She is beloved in this valley. A healer, a wife, a blessing. You lost your right the day you took silver for her." One by one, the valley spoke for her. The sergeant looked at Jacob, then at Clarabith. His voice was firm. "This woman is here of her own will. We are leaving." Jacob stared at Clarabith, his face crumbling, anger defeated, power gone. And she felt nothing. No fear, no shame. Only freedom. The soldiers forced Jacob onto his horse. They rode out, disappearing into the trees, taking her past with them. Caleb pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried. Not tears of pain, but relief. Her life truly began that night. Winter came. Peace returned. She and Caleb shared long evenings by the fire, speaking, laughing, loving. Spring arrived bright and wild. And one morning, as Clarabith knelt in her garden, she felt something new inside her. A flutter of warmth. A child. Their child. Caleb held her as she told him, tears shining in both their eyes. "You carry the future of this valley," he whispered. The valley celebrated the news. Sarah cried. Old Samuel thanked the heavens. The children brought her wildflowers. The girl who had been thrown away now carried a new life, one born of love, safety, and choice. The legend of the Snow Angel spread through the mountains. Not the cursed child, not the ghost girl, but the woman who faced darkness and found a home, found love, found herself. The woman who turned a valley into a family, and who finally learned what she truly was. Not a curse, not a burden, but a blessing, a goddess of the mountains. Do you believe that sometimes what the world calls broken is simply waiting for someone who sees beauty instead of flaws? That the worst beginning can lead to the most sacred ending? This story reminds us that worth is not determined by those who cannot see it, but by those brave enough to recognize it. Sometimes the person sold as worthless becomes the person most treasured, and sometimes the place meant to be a grave becomes a garden. If this story moved you, subscribe to hear more tales from the frontier. Stories of daughters rejected who became queens of valleys, of men who saw past scars and saw souls, and of love that transforms curses into blessings. Share your thoughts if you believe that every person dismissed as different is simply waiting for the community that will call them sacred. Sometimes the greatest revenge against those who hated you is simply becoming everything they said you could never be: loved, valued, and free.